Welcome to Grow Good, a podcast of conversion stories, to share encounters with the living God, to bear good fruit, a place where others can meet or be inspired to meet God. So get cozy, lean in, and listen close. Miracles are at work, and He wants to meet you too. My name is Rachel Smith, and I'm your host. Now let's start growing some good. Welcome, Taylor. Welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Could you start us out by just telling us a little bit about you and what you do right now?
Yes. I guess start with primary vocation. I'm a wife and a mother, and I have three kids, 6, 2, and 6 months. I live in Utah, right outside of Salt Lake City, with my husband, originally from right outside of Chicago. But we moved here about 6 years ago because we love the mountains and just the lifestyle out here. I am currently the director of influencer and brand marketing at the Hallow app, which is a Catholic prayer and meditation app. So that's, I guess, a little bit about me. I'm a convert, which I think we'll talk about.
Yes. So excited to get to your story today. But that sounds like fun. Man, you have a very full life going on. And we are recording this in the summer. So we're like in the thick of just fun times with the kiddos,
Oh,
right?
yes, every day. It's like, okay, what camp are you in this week? We've got like dance camp and all these different activities, especially for my 6-year-old. It has to be kept busy, I think. But yeah,
Aw.
it's been a good summer that gone by fast. We actually got to take a nice family vacation for a couple of weeks. That's sort of an extended maternity leave of mine. So it's been nice.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. All right, well, let's get into it. Can you just, I guess, walk us through your journey in the faith? Maybe you could start by sharing a little bit how you were raised or how you were brought up and what your relationship to God was growing up. And then if you can remember a moment when it kind of became real to you and it became less about kind of what people were telling you and more maybe about, oh, I think this actually might be real. I love to hear that moment.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So I grew up Protestant. I think I was baptized Methodist, and then, but my mom, my parents were divorced. I really don't think we started going to any sort of church until my mom met my current stepdad, which was when I was about 6 years old. And they found a church, and it was a Nazarene church, and so we started going to that. And I kind of grew up in that church. And I really loved it. I sang in like the church band. I did all the church camps every summer. I did all of the like activities, vacation Bible schools. Like I actually felt like the youth group, growing up in middle school and high school was like kind of like a second home. I spent a lot of time there. I had so many friends. I had a lot of boyfriends, I guess, like that happened in there. So it was really good. But I think like in a lot of the Protestant like evangelical churches, you quote like give your life to Christ. I think at like a certain point when you're asking like about when you find out it was real. And I do think that there is like some not that it's not truth, but there definitely was a point where I like made the conscious decision, and I would probably say it was like 16 years old, maybe. I think I was at like a summer camp. It's always, I mean, even like in the Catholic faith, like when you go to big events, like powerful moving events, places like Seek or, anytime you're at like an event where everybody is like, you're praising God in adoration, like there is something there that's like so much more moving than sometimes when you're just at home or like in your home parish. And so I think it was like at a church camp, and on like a worship night, worship music. I'm a huge like worship music fan, and I still am. Like today, it is something that I still really enjoy, and definitely a place where I feel connected to God. And so, yeah, I would probably say like that was the moment. And then I think I got like rebaptized when you like choose and you go in like what looks like a hot tub at the church. And so I did that. And then for college, I went to the University of Notre Dame. And so I went to a Catholic college,
Oh, wow.
but I was not a Catholic.
Yeah.
I also kind of grew up, my grandparents, my dad went to Catholic schools, but they were my stepdad, but they were all Lutheran. And so
Ah,
I used to, but then my grandma would go to a Catholic church. And I remember there was this moment,
wow.
and I was probably in high school, and I had gone to mass with her, and the priest. Priests don't always do this. It must have been like maybe like a mass where there was a lot of visitors, or maybe just this particular church. But he actually like said during like right before the like Eucharist that if you're not Catholic that you can't take it. And I was like, well, why? Like I don't understand.
Mm.
And then my grandma later then explained it, or somebody explained it to me, and I'm like, wait, but I could believe that. I believe that, like, because in the Nazarene church we would do communion like once a month, and it was like a
Oh, wow.
little Ritz cracker and a mini cup shot glass of grape juice was
Wow.
essentially it. But like, I really felt so deeply that I believed the Catholic understanding of the Eucharist, and I think once I got, and I'm probably like speeding ahead here a little bit in my story, but once I got to Notre Dame, that was really the thing that propelled me into my interest and desire to become Catholic.
Yeah. So, wow. Yeah. That's so interesting. Only once a month. Do you remember why was it once a month? Was there a reason behind
I mean,
that?
it wasn't sacramental, right? So it was
Right.
just like, so it was like symbolic. And so I
Yeah.
think they felt like once a month was enough. I don't, and it was a pretty like active active church and community. So people went very regularly. It wasn't like, I think in some churches where like people don't show up all the time. People did show up pretty regularly. So I think by doing it once a month, maybe they felt like they covered it. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. That always is so fascinating to me because I don't know. I grew up in a Catholic home. And so I feel like I don't know. I've learned so much through hearing people's stories, but it always kind of fascinates me being Catholic and hearing that. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like, huh, that's so interesting. Like you still feel it's important enough to do,
Yes.
but yet it's a symbol and it's
Yes.
not the Lord. So it's just like, it's just very interesting. So I could see how, in a way, it would actually be I know it's not for a lot of people, but I can actually see how it would be an easy kind of like, especially when you're like 16 or something and you're kind of like, oh, I believe that. Like, that's what, like, it kind of makes
Like
sense.
that's what I thought I was doing. Was that
Right,
not what I
right.
was doing?
Exactly. As a Catholic, like in looking at that, I can see how that would be the train of thought. But I also have heard, obviously, it can be a huge stumbling block for people too. So I
Mhm.
think it's just interesting and fascinating to think about. But so yeah, so when you got to Notre Dame, what was it that I don't know, what was it that drew you in about Catholicism then that maybe when it was your grandma or, it seems like when you got to college, it started to really kind of more pick up
Yeah,
steam.
and interestingly, so it both picked up and like other areas didn't. So I think I wouldn't say it's like a problem, but part of the problem at Notre Dame is like mass attendance is very cultural. I live
Mm,
in Utah right now, and like being a Mormon is more cultural than it is that anybody actually understands what they believe.
mm,
And I would say the same is very true at Notre Dame. And so, every Sunday night in the dorm, there's mass, and you go down and you're in your sweatpants, which, like, looking back on it, I'm like, how irreverent were we all? But, like, you just follow along with what everybody else is doing. Not like, I think I rarely attended mass at the Basilica before I converted. And even after I converted, I don't think I did, because it was just so conveniently located in your dorm
Right.
that you
Wow,
would
I
just
didn't know
like
that.
walk down. Yeah, like you'd be studying on Sunday night, and then like I think our dorm's mass was at 8 p.m. Some dorms mass were at like 10 p.m. And then you would
Wow.
just like go to mass and then go back and go study. And so like, your whole floor would have like a great exodus like down to mass. So
Wow.
there was so much of it that was cultural. But then, so I'd go to mass with my friends and roommates, and then I'd be like, well, I believe in this, in everything around the Eucharist, but I can't take it. And so I
Mm.
think I had gotten like kind of fed up about it by my sophomore year. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to like go into this Catholic thing because I want to be able to take communion. And so
Wow.
honestly, like, it was the Eucharist that really drew me in, the like desire to take it. And I mean, I would sit in in many ways, like looking back, it wasn't like vain, but I'm not sure it was like always for the right reasons. Like, it's not that I was pressured, but I felt like I needed to kind of like be part of this community. But then I also like believed this one particular thing, but was very much, and this is actually who I was for like the first several years I was a Catholic. I was one of those people who was like, well, I believe this, but I don't necessarily believe that, even though that's like a tenet of the faith. And so I'm just gonna like, pretend that's like not a thing. And I was never fully committed to it for many, many years. And I think, there was, and I can talk about this too, like there was a point even like when I was married that I was not going to Catholic church, and I was going back to a Protestant church because I felt like I didn't have any, like a home anywhere. And so,
Wow. Yeah.
um, I think that, yeah, I mean, so it was definitely very cultural. Terrible formation, terrible catechesis that I had at Notre Dame. And I think,
Ugh.
again, like they just assume that everyone is Catholic, or like you
Right.
would like, and so I think that they felt like they didn't need to do, and then it was on like, I'm pretty sure like the classes were on like a Sunday after everyone had gone out after a football game. So it wasn't really an ideal state of mind that you were in anyway.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I don't think I had fallen in with the right crowd either. Like now working at Hallow, there's a lot of people who went to Notre Dame who also work at Hallow. And had I been friends with those people, I think I would have been a very different person. But most of my friends, and including my sponsor in RCIA, are not Catholic anymore. And
Wow.
so I think that's kind of a little bit of it too.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I feel like too, in hearing all these stories, I think who does your RCIA makes such a difference. I don't know. I've been thinking, I'm like, we should really standardize that better. Like, it should be more of a thing that there's certain things you're supposed to do for RCIA
Yeah,
because it just sounds like it's such a different experience, totally dependent on which parish you're at. And some have an amazing program where you get like so much beauty and goodness out of it. And then some, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, you're here. Okay, check. Like, you're in. And it's like they don't get any explanation of the faith before you actually join the church. So, yeah, I think I definitely feel like that's somewhere maybe the Lord is calling me someday to work in because I think it's just so essential too because those people and those souls at that point like they're definitely being drawn by the Holy Spirit. Like something's
mhm,
going on. The fact that they want to come in, like for you, it was the Eucharist and that alone is so beautiful. Like clearly grace was working in your life and in your heart, but then it's such like fertile ground to be able to reach you with the rest of the teachings. And if you don't have a good program, then right, you can kind of just not get the catechesis you need, and then you're kind of just left to like drift around. After you come into the church you
totally.
feel kind of
Yes.
totally lost. And yeah, you don't really have necessarily community because I think just the whole being Catholic is so integrated in your everything about your life. Like it's like it becomes integrated in the way that you live in such a way that I think, right, if you don't have that catechesis to understand what you're doing, it can become really just like you're going through motions, which I think can
Hmm.
happen with a lot of people. Are you feeling drawn to God and want to start a prayer life, but you're just not sure how to get started? I need to tell you about this app that I love called the Hallow app. It is a Catholic prayer and meditation app that has everything you need already laid out and pre recorded for you. So all you need to do is press play and allow the Lord to speak to your heart. They will walk you through everything. They have the daily gospels, they have guided silence with the Lord, they have the rosary, saint stories, prayers for Lent and Advent, and all the different seasons of the church. Everything you need in one easy to use app, which I love, especially in this season of motherhood with a newborn. I've been using it for the daily gospel meditations, which I love every morning. And then my daily rosary at night. They have all the mysteries. Everything's already there. So you don't need to think about what you need. You can just press play and allow the Lord to speak to your heart. Go to hallow.com/growgood to get a 3-month free trial of the whole premium product. It's amazing for 3 months. And if you decide to purchase at that point, you can get 20% off your purchase as well. If you go to hallow.com/growgood, that's HALLOW, hallow.com/growgood for 3-month free trial and 20% off the Hallow Premium Plus edition. Emotions, which I think can happen with a lot of people. But I'd love to hear, a little bit more about what happened in those years after. So you became Catholic at Notre Dame.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I think my
Okay.
sophomore year.
Okay. And then kind of like what happened in those years after, where it sounds like you were maybe the cafeteria Catholic, as
I mean,
people
I was
call it,
probably
right?
worse. I was probably worse than the cafeteria. I look back on like who I was then, and I almost think I had a worse relationship with Jesus than when I was a Protestant, because I do think that there are some things that the Protestants really hammer on that, especially like, I'm pretty sure at Notre Dame I never heard the word theology of the body. Like I never, or the phrase.
Yes.
I never heard it. I never knew what it was. And I think that the Protestants sometimes do a better job with like sexual ethics and things like that, and the ways that those are pushed than sometimes, some Catholics do. And so, I mean, yeah, I was terrible. I've since gone to confession many times, for various things that I did in the years, probably between when I converted and when I met my husband, and even in the beginning stages of our relationship. Like he was cradle Catholic, so, and like, again, probably he also went to Notre Dame, um, cafeteria Catholic at that time too. So it was two people who like were not strengthening each other's faith and were living in the world and really just going along with the world's things. And so, I mean, I went to mass again. I lived with Notre Dame people when I graduated from Notre Dame. And so we would go to mass, not as regularly there because it wasn't as convenient.
Right.
But we would. And so, I kind of kept it going there. And then, I met my husband, also Catholic, but neither of us were strong enough to support each other. And so, we actually got married. When we originally got married, was not a Catholic like sacrament. So we
Wow.
got married
Wow.
in November of 2015. And then, we didn't have our Catholic like marriage until July of 2016. So almost
Mm.
like a year later. And we were living together, I mean,
Yeah.
we thought we were married, but we weren't actually married as far as it was sacramentally. And so, yeah, I mean, we weren't great, but then things, started to shift, I think. We went through a really hard time in the beginning of our marriage, and then I got pregnant unintended with our daughter, our 6-year-old. And so, I think that like moment really, or that event in our life kind of brought us back to like, hey, what are we like living this life for? And, I look at a lot of my friends who I went to college with who are, 33, they don't have kids. And I think that I mean, marriage is the most sanctifying, marriage and being a mom, like being a mom is the
Yes.
most sanctifying thing I've ever done in my life. And so like, I think that the start of that was like really the start of me trying to change, who I was and like connect more closely with God. But I still wasn't there. The story keeps going, and I still wasn't there. And it
I
really
love
wasn't until
that though.
the start of COVID that I
Mm.
actually like turned my life around and became the Catholic who I was meant to be, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I love this because I just think it's so relatable. Like it's not I don't know, and listening to you, I'm just like it's life, Like we all are just human beings. Like we just have baggage and we have ways and things that are holding us back and things we're not even aware of. I think in my own journey with the Lord now, it's like I feel like he's just now making things like apparent to me that like I didn't even know to know. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like
Hmm.
obviously when you tell your story looking back, it sounds so obvious, but at the time you just weren't, you just weren't ready maybe yet in those ways and the Lord was preparing you and working on you. And I love the image of I've heard this image of like smoothing out rocks with like the ocean,
Hmm.
and how the Lord just like slowly but steadily just like works on our heart and works on our soul and just like continues to call us and continues to draw us back to him. And it can go through seasons, of like dryness or seasons of just like you're so on fire, you know what I mean? But I think it's a journey and which is partly why we love to hear these stories on the show because it's like it's a lifelong process of conversion. It's not like it just
Yep.
happens once and kind of like what we were talking about in the Protestant world sometimes it's like, "Oh, you accepted Jesus, you're done. Like congrats, it's all good from here, but it's like man, no, like the Catholic understanding is so much more like beautiful and deep and nuanced, that it's like this lifelong conversion journey that we're all on
Hmm.
together. And it's a sanctifying process that we go through in our vocations. And I think there's this deepening that's continuing to happen, like you're saying. So yeah, so I would love to hear what happened in those years, I guess, after welcoming your first child and then with COVID. Like
Yeah.
what was it about it that made you go even deeper?
Yeah. Well, it actually started a little before COVID. There was a girl that I went to high school with who like I would not have considered us friends in high school. We were just like acquaintances. Um, and we probably like didn't get along. I was probably mean to her.
Oh,
But we were Facebook friends. And she had had a serious reversion in her life as well. And she had made a Facebook post that, and the Holy Spirit prompts you. I felt I think at the time we were actually we had moved to Utah. We were going to a Protestant church because we just like didn't know like what to do. I felt like I didn't
mm,
want to go back to Catholic church because I thought it was boring and I like didn't connect with it anymore. And I wanted to go back to a church that had good music. And
mm,
so we were going to a Protestant church, but I was still like feeling like something was missing. Like we were even part of like an alpha group, I think, at this church. But I had still felt like something was missing. And so I saw that she had made a Facebook post inviting people to join a virtual Bible study. And I was like, okay, I loved Bible studies back in the day. I like don't have a lot of friends who would be willing to do a Bible study, so I'll like raise my hand and do it. And so joined this virtual Bible study. A lot of the women were military spouses, so they were kind of all over the world. And so we did a women in the new evangelization like wine it's called. If you've ever heard of it, it's like one of like a women's evangelization group. We did one of their studies, and I really loved it, and I started feeling my heart convert a little bit more and a little bit more, and also hear and listen to these women who were many leaps ahead of me in their own faith conversions and reversions and callings as wives and mothers, and feel inspired to want to be better. And
yeah.
so we did one of those, and then we did a walking with purpose study, which are also really good.
Yes. So good.
And so my heart was like being changed slowly. around the same time I was going through a lot personally of like really hard things. So I was in a job situation that I hated and unfortunately involved like me being in like business with my stepdad, who I was formerly really close with, but then grew to not be so close with because we were working together in what I was a toxic situation.
Mm.
Um, and my grandpa was really sick and he was dying, and I was very close with him. And so this was all right before COVID, and then COVID happened, and
Mm.
um, I was in a a very dark place, like very depressed. Looking back at it, very depressed, just not in a good headspace. We only had the one daughter or one uh, child then, and so when mass is closed or like church is closed, my husband and
Mhm.
I started going back to church once I joined this Bible study, like met all these women, I was like, all right, let's try going back to the Catholic Church. So we had started going back to mass. We were starting to really enjoy it. It was during Lent and churches closed. And so we decided that for Lent, then since we couldn't go to mass, we were going to give up all non-religious television. And
Mm.
so we watched, some things on YouTube, but then we found and watched a lot of things on Formed. And we had happened across a series called Symbolon, which was something that Dr. Edward Shree put together on Formed. And you talk about like standardizing RCIA. Every
Yes.
RCIA should show this series to
Yes.
their people
Yes.
because he broke down the faith in a way that, I mean, at this point, I'd been a Catholic now for like 10 years or 7 years. I don't know how long it was. I had never heard the faith explained the way that he
Mm.
did it. It was so easy to understand. It was so beautiful. And it all started to like make sense. And it came from like, oh, well, I mean, like Dr. Shree also talks a lot about like moral relativism. And I was definitely like in that camp before, like, oh, well, like this is fine for that person, but it's like not fine. But I don't think it's fine for me, but like it's fine for them. Or like in the faith, I mean, like I don't understand why priests can't get married. And like the little things, but those started to go away because like
Mm.
he really explained it to me in such a beautiful, beautiful way. And so that was like I would say one of the main things that like really kind of reverted me. And then I, my grandpa was nearing the end of his life, and I was like very angry at God still, and just like I'm doing all these things, I'm getting better, but like things don't seem to be getting better, and I still am feeling like this darkness inside. And so I remember hearing in Symbolon about the Rosary. I'd never prayed the Rosary before, didn't know how to pray the Rosary, didn't learn that in our CIA class, and so I'm looking up like how do you pray the Rosary, and that's actually how I stumbled upon Hallow and
Wow.
downloaded it as a user. Saw that the founders had also gone to Notre Dame, connected with them on LinkedIn, and I saw that they were hiring. And on a whim, I'm like, I'll apply. I was very unqualified. I'm still very unqualified for my job, but
Hmm.
I applied, and I mean, it, we all at Hallow we say like we do nothing and God does everything, and that's the same way that I feel in my life. And so I got the job, and I quit the job with my dad, and he didn't talk to me for many months, but um, ultimately it completely changed my life,
Wow.
my family's life, the way that we see the world, my husband's life, because then, once I started down this path of reversion, he actually connected with a lot of the husbands in this Bible study group. And he went through Exodus 90. And then
Wow.
this last year, he led an Exodus 90
Oh my
group.
gosh.
And so
Wow.
like, I mean, just like the fruits that have, come to us, to our marriage, to our family have been like really rich. And I mean, I'm nowhere near, I mean, even now I would probably call myself in a place of like, I don't know, maybe like desolation a little bit, just like trying to figure out what's my next book to read or like what is my next step spiritually. But
Hmm.
I at least now feel like I have the tools to maneuver that, and that like I'm not floundering necessarily in like the truths, but
Right.
still like on the path with at least trajectory this way instead
Right.
of this way.
Right. Right. And you have, I feel like it's like you have a foundation under you.
Hmm.
I want to say thank you to today's episode sponsor, Thomas and Arts. Thomas and Arts is an amazing family-owned and run art business, small business that is creating original art and affordable reproductions for contemporary beauty to flourish in community and culture. It's just this beautiful family raising 5 boys in Colorado that has felt inspired and called by God to produce and create original artwork that shares the saints, the Holy Family, and other beautiful artwork in a contemporary and creative way and culture while they're at it. So go check out some of their beautiful prints and artwork at thomasandarts.com. That's THOMASON arts.com. And you can use code 2GROWGOOD at checkout for 10% off your order. Use code 2GROWGOOD, all one word, at thomasandarts.com for 10% off your order. Foundation under you. So crazy because my women's group is doing Symbolon now.
So good.
I mean, what are the odds of that? Like, of all the programs out there, that's what we're doing for the summer. And you just said that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is crazy.
Aren't you loving it though?
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. And exactly what you're saying. Like, I do feel like there should be, like, I don't know, certain, like, a list of certain things. Like, because there's other good programs like that, you know what I mean, that go through. But yeah, just something like that, that like hits all the bases in a way that's really relatable and well done. And just, yes, because I totally agree. And what you said too about theology of the body earlier, I can totally relate to that. I had never heard of what that was. But the first time I heard it actually like beautifully explained to me, it just opened up my world in such a deep, beautiful way. And I was like, how are we not sharing this? You know, like we need to share this more with people.
Yes. And I think
Yeah.
there's like two, like we don't like just Jason Everett doesn't need to share it, right? Like we need
Right.
people who are like
You
us
and me.
that need to share it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I know. I think it's, I forget who said it that I first heard it. Maybe Father Mike Schmitz, but it's like when you hear like, oh, the church needs to do that. The church needs to do that. It's like, we are the church, you and me. We're the church. Let's do it. And, you know, like we have all the tools, like we have all the blessings that God like has given us in the church. So let's use them to help people. So yeah, I love so many things that you're saying. And I just love how your story has been like a gradual growing deeper into him. I wanted to ask too, this is kind of going backwards, but what was it that got you and your husband to get married in the church sacramentally?
I don't know, guilt, Catholic guilt. I'm not
Really?
actually, you know, I to
Did
be
you
honest,
learn
I'm pretty
like,
sure we had planned. So I mean, we went through. I'm pretty sure that we went through pre-Cana before we
okay,
had our first wedding.
okay,
So I think
yeah,
we had intended always to have a church wedding, but we got married in Sonoma and we wanted to get married on a vineyard. And interestingly enough, my pastor growing up, the whole like in the Nazarene church, is the person who married us there. So there was
gotcha.
like kind of this nice um I don't know, connection or whatever. But I don't think we knew at the time that it was a bad thing what we were doing, that
Mm-hmm.
like that it wasn't. I don't really even know if we fully, also having gone through pre-Cana, which tells you how great our pre-Cana program was, I don't think we fully even understood that like we weren't married until we
Right.
had like our sacramental marriage. And so I mean, but we were terrible. Like I remember when the people came in for like the NFP part of the pre-Cana, and like all we did, I'm pretty sure, was like make fun of them for how they could have so many children. And now I'm like, wait, another reason though why I think like normal people need to go in there and like no, I mean like you don't need to have 8 kids if you don't want to have, and if like God is not calling you to have 8 children.
Right. Yeah, no, but I can totally relate. I think that that happens to a lot of people because they're just not, it's never been explained to them in a way that it's like the fully integrated person, like we're saying with theology of the body and how
Mm-hmm.
beautiful it is.
Yeah, it's
Instead
more
of,
like it's like a you can't do this, or like you like it's like when you You have kids too, right? Do you have kids?
Yeah, yeah. We
Yeah, it's like
just had
when,
our first. Yeah.
oh my gosh. So like
I
you have to
know.
do the positives instead.
Yeah.
You haven't probably haven't gotten there, but like now in schools, like instead of having a sign that says like no running, they have a sign that says use walking feet. Because like you're using the
Mm,
positives instead of like the no, no, no. Where I think that like when you go to a pre-K and a NFP class, it's like, no, you don't do this, you don't do that, versus like talking about the beauty of theology body. But anyway, that's kind of going off on a random tangent.
no, yeah, I agree. It depends. I think some people do it really well, and some people it can get lost or be dry. I also think so much like in looking at my own story too. It's like it so depends on like where your heart is at and where you are
Mm-hmm.
at. Cause like then I
Yeah.
reflect and I'm like, maybe they did. Maybe I just was like totally
I
closed
mean, I'm
off.
sure.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like
Yes.
I think it's a little bit of probably a both, It's
Yeah.
like I think it depends on how open your heart is
Yeah.
and how spiritually thirsty you are, because same thing like I was thinking when you said Symbolon just had like the exact thing you needed right when you needed it. You know what I mean? But I could see someone else watching it and being kind of like, yeah, like
It's
maybe
probably
it's just
true.
not the time, not to say that it's a great program, but I just mean I think the Holy Spirit like brings us to what we
Mm-hmm.
need when we need it,
Yeah.
when we need it, then it's like exactly the words we need. Because I've had these moments and I'll share it with a friend or whatever, and they're kind of like it doesn't hit the same way, and I'm like, what the heck? Do you realize what this says? But I think it
I
just
mean, I guess that's
depends.
true.
It's a
Like when you read the
mystery.
Bible, it's like Lectio
Yeah.
Divina, right? Like you and I can meditate for hours on the same exact verse and get something completely
Yes.
different. And even
Yes.
like 6 months down the road, I could get another something completely different from the same exact verse. And I think that's also
Yes.
is just something like so beautiful too about like particularly the traditions of the faith.
Yes. Yeah. Which actually it's a great segue because I wanted to ask you before we move on to just kind of other resources and things like that. But I wanted to ask you just like going from a Protestant background to Catholicism, sounds like the Eucharist was really the big draw. But was there anything that were drawbacks or obstacles? Like,
Mm.
did you get on board with the saints and Mary and like all these other things about the faith? Or was it kind of just like, I just want the Eucharist and I'm just going to ignore everything else?
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, like I don't. I'm pretty sure. Like I barely learned about the saints until I started working at Hallow. I'm like not even joking. Again, it's just like
Wow.
it's not something that's talked about. Like
Mm,
I
mhm.
never listened to Father Mike before I started working at Hallow. I wish I had. I mean, and our priest isn't the best homilist, and so it's like you don't. I haven't. I never like learned. You walk in and you see this picture of like we have a huge portrait of like the Divine Mercy, but like nobody ever explains to you what that means on an
Right.
entry basis. Like on it, they just assume that everybody knows. And so,
Yep.
no, I had no relationship with the saints. I'm still working on a relationship with Mary because I have a pretty bad relationship with my mom. So it's like,
Mm,
and having had divorced parents, then I also like don't have a great like Saint Joseph relationship situation. But I've been working. I did a Marian consecration. That was really beautiful.
oh, beautiful. Yeah.
And so like definitely been working on the relationship with Mary. But having grown up as a Protestant, it's Jesus, Jesus, Jesus all the way. And
Right.
so it's a little hard to erase that from your mind, and from your heart. And so yeah, I mean that there's definitely so many things in the Catholic faith that I struggled with in the beginning, and that's probably what made me such a lukewarm Catholic. But and just like not believing anything, but yeah, I like love learning about this. I mean, we named our daughter Avila, so
Oh, I
we
love
obviously we
that.
obviously have like a big connection to them now. Um,
Yes.
but we didn't before. Our first our
Mm-hmm.
our first daughter happens to be named after a saint, not because it was intentional, but because it just was a happenstance. So,
Wow.
um, but yeah, it's so she yeah, now I have a much deeper connection with the saints. But yeah, it was really the Eucharist that drew me in.
Mm. Yeah, and that's beautiful. I think like God knows, right? He knows what we are drawn to and he'll use that and then continue to use things as we grow in the faith
Mhm.
continue to draw us in and deeper in different ways, which I love, because it's like there's so much in Catholicism, so many different devotions and things. It's like the Holy Spirit can just use something at any point, depending on where you're at, to draw you in deeper and to have a
Mhm.
deeper devotion or relationship with Him in different ways. So, what would you say have been some of your greatest joys and challenges since becoming Catholic and since knowing the Lord, really?
Yeah. Um, I think like one of my greatest joys is now that like we're a lot more serious about our faith is then seeing it now in our 6-year-old as she like grows into it. She has a
Mm,
deep love of Mary that like I'm
mm,
like jealous of. And like, which and like she wants to, she started her first year this last year of like religious ed, and they have the little play at Christmas, and like her goal is to be Mary when she's in 3rd grade. Like that's like her
oh,
thing. And
I
so
love
I would say that's
that.
like a huge joy. We don't, a challenge is having 3, small children at mass. My husband and we actually trade off a lot. So like he'll go to Saturday night mass and I'll go to Sunday morning mass. And I know some people might think like, well, you should just bring your kids to mass and like they'll learn and stuff. But I think that there are times where I just need to get something out of the mass and like not be like wrangling a child all the time. And I know that like you get a lot of grace from just being there and being there with your kids. But if we don't have to, be like with everyone, and we can still each be able to go to the mass and like be fully present,
Mm,
every so often. That's just something for us that we is right for our family. And then I mean, challenge. I still struggle with NFP. We had, our last 2 babies really close together, and
mm,
it's been mentally and physically and emotionally draining for me. And so, I mean, I still very much struggle with it, because the ramifications are I love like our 3rd child she's like such a blessing. I'm so glad, but it was very, very hard when I found out I was pregnant with her. And,
mm,
there was a lot of why, God, why? And, obviously looking back now, I'm like, she fits perfectly in our family. I couldn't imagine her not being here. She's like an angel baby, but in those moments, human flesh and human weakness takes over, and you can't always see beyond. So I think that that's
mm,
both a struggle and a joy, because she is a joy. But
mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you love coffee with your prayer time as much as I love coffee with my prayer time? I think you do. And why not pair delicious coffee with amazing saints with Catholic coffee? If you go to CatholicCoffee.com, you can take 15% off any order with code GROW at checkout. They are amazing Catholic company that pairs roast with different saints, and it's really fun when they come in the mail. They even have little tidbits about each saint, and you can use it as an evangelization opportunity, as a gift, or to share it with your family and to learn more about our Catholic faith. Go to CatholicCoffee.com and use code GROW at checkout for 15% off.
She is a joy. But
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for your honesty. I think that's so true. It's sometimes too, like we can kind of, yeah, just paint it like it's all sunshine and roses. And it's like, no, there's struggle. Like this is like you were saying, this is like sanctification. This is not supposed to like feel great all the time. I mean, there's deep joy, but there's also the purification, going on in becoming a mom and being a mom and living out our vocation and marriage and kids and all that. So it's not easy, which I think I like to hear that from people too in their stories, that it's like, okay, now that I'm walking with God, what are the challenges? Because it's not like you become Catholic and everything goes away. Actually, the Lord tells us, right? Like, take up your cross daily and follow me. It's not going to be easy, it's going to be hard. But He's with you and He wants to help carry your burdens and, yeah, do it right alongside you. So, uh, yeah. And I feel like so many people say the joy and the challenges are all mixed together, which is such a
Mhm.
Catholic answer too. It's like it's all just like wrapped into one, which is life. So it's beautiful. So I wanted to give you a chance to share some of your standout influences along your journey. So you kind of did as you were going. So I heard wine, walking with purpose, Hallow, of course. We love Hallow. um, but are there any other influences that have helped you on your journey and that still maybe are helping you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, I obviously we support all apps and spaces. I do really love Formed. I think that
Yeah.
the content on Formed is like, I mean, some of it is like cringy, like the dubbed over Italian saint movies, although they're still somewhat interesting. Um, but like the JP2 movie on Formed, like changed my life. The one with John Voight, it's so good.
Oh, really? I'll have to
And
watch
yes,
that.
it's so
Yeah.
yes, it's really, we watch it every year, like usually
Oh, I
during
love
Lent or something like
that.
that. So yeah, it's really good. And then, I mean, and it's great. Formed is great for, they have good kids content as well.
Yes. Yeah, I'll have to check
Um,
that out.
so that's really nice. And then, yeah, so I mean, like Father Mike, I listen to his homilies every single week,
Yes.
either before or after
So
Mass.
good.
And I'm pretty sure I told Father Mike when I met him, I'm like, you've changed my life. Like you've changed me and my husband's life. I'm pretty sure I like that we laugh at Hallow because as part of my job, I work with a lot of the content providers and guests we have, who many of them happen to be like celebrities and stuff. And everybody laughs. The only person I've ever fangirled over is Father Mike. Like
Oh
he's
man.
just
Yeah.
he's just the
I
best.
don't blame you at all. He really is just the
Yes.
best.
And Sister Miriam as well. We did
Oh,
her and
yes.
Dr. Bob
So
Schuch's
good.
book in one of our Bible studies once, and that was
So
amazing.
good.
And I was with her at a recording the week that I found out I was pregnant with Avila. And I was in like such a
Oh.
bad place. And she like kind of talked me through it, and she was absolutely amazing.
Oh,
And so yeah, I mean,
wow.
like there's people who I've discovered since like having my more reversion in like the Catholic world, um, that have been great. And then I also really like, my husband listens to Catholic Answers like nonstop, and I'll tune in occasionally, and I do feel like I learned something. It's not my like style of like apologetics is not necessarily the my what resonates super well with me on like a teaching perspective, but I do think that there's a lot of great information um, available. And then I've learned so much from a lot of my colleagues, like
Mm.
people who are just so deep in their faith and have read like everything. And I mean, not everyone at Hallow is Catholic, but there are some of the most wonderful people and Catholics that I've met, that I know my whole life, work there, and I learn a lot from them as well. Actually,
Yeah,
a few of them have their own podcasts too, where they like talk about stuff of the faith,
that's
which is great
awesome.
because I feel like I learn a lot.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Oh, so good. Yes, so many good resources. I love too just that we live in this age now where there's so many resources that are just like amazing that you can just access, which is I think changing the game for so many people because
Mm-hmm.
you can just find shows, kind of like what we were saying before we hopped on. A lot of our listeners here, they're feeling drawn to God, and then boom, they just are listening to conversion stories, just because they can just find that now, which I think is such a blessing and a grace that the Lord is providing us in this age. It's amazing. Um, all right. Well, to wrap up, I love to ask, what is one scripture verse that has either played a foundational role in your journey or that is just on your heart right now in your
Yeah,
life? And why?
actually, something did come to mind. We were talking before this. I couldn't think of. I was trying to
Mhm.
think of one, but something actually did come to mind, and it would really be like the like Mary, like the Magnificat and Mary's yes. I have
Mm.
the Father Mike tattoo philosophy, and my next tattoo is gonna say fiat because I think that that's like the motto for this part of my life, especially like my life as a mom, is just like saying yes, especially when it's really hard,
Mm.
and accepting and being the handmaid of the Lord and always just saying yes to whatever He asks of me.
That is so good. I love that. I just love Mary. I just love her yes and
Have
her
you
fiat.
always loved Mary?
No, no. She actually was like, I remember when I was growing up, I kind of had this whole kind of like coldness about her because it was like, oh,
Mm.
the only time we talk about a woman is when we're talking about how she gave birth to a man. I had this kind of like patriarchal, like, oh, it's all about men. Like that was sort of
Mm-hmm.
my issue in like, high school. And as I was drifting away from the faith, I was like, of course, we only bring her up when we're talking about Jesus, which makes total sense. I mean, hello, it's God. But I was totally missing the power of her fiat. So I love that you like nailed the fiat because I still remember too, and I forget who it was, but probably Father Mike, who knows. The first time I heard like the fiat explained, because that was never explained to me in my CCD growing up. Like no one ever explained Mary in this like beautiful, empowering, incredible way
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
her giving her fiat, which changed the whole course of history and
Yeah.
like made salvation possible. Like
Yeah.
it's just amazing that like God chose to work through a woman in that way and like that she cooperated so freely with his grace. And I find it so inspiring and empowering now as a woman to have her to look to and to
Mm-hmm.
be a guide, and especially now in motherhood to be able to just relate at that level too. It's just of course, it's everything God knows that we need, right? Like,
Yes.
and I think it can be a stumbling block when we're struggling. We're struggling with different things and we're drifting from God. Um, I think Mary can be one of the hardest things because she's so powerful. I think that's why there's so much like
Mm-hmm.
it's all so complicated because there's so much power there. I feel like the evil one just loves to twist things when it comes to Mary because if women actually understood her power and the power that we have as women in Christ, then he's in trouble. So he does everything he can to like twist our minds up about womanhood and Mary and her fiat. So I really appreciate that you said that because it just her fiat gets me going now.
I love it.
Oh, so good. Well, thank you so much, Taylor, for just coming on and sharing your journey so vulnerably and openly. And it was such a pleasure to just learn from you and hear how the Lord has worked in your life. And I love the subtle stories of saying yes at deeper moments in our lives, especially when we're in a hard season. I think often the Lord is doing a really great work in our lives. Um, I've just heard that time and again through these conversion stories too. It's so often that someone's in a really dark place or there's a lot of things happening in their life. And usually they're able to obviously be on the other side and look back and be like, wow, looking back, I actually saw how the Lord was really moving things around that
Mm-hmm.
needed to be moved so that I could find him at a deeper level. And that's one of the things I love about conversion stories too, is to just hear the ways that God works like that. And so thank you for sharing yours.
No, thank you for doing this. I do think that there's so many people with, I mean, even people who are cradle Catholics, like everybody has a journey. None of us are born saints or even close. And so I think that we're all just trying to strive for sainthood in the best way we can.
Yes. Amen. Well, thank you. And
Thank you.
hopefully we'll be in touch. I know we will be
Yeah.
because everyone go download Hallow. It's an awesome
Yes.
app. And go to hallow.com/growgood and use our, you get 3 months free, right? You
Yes.
get the, yes. So go to that link. I will also have a formal ad. I know you all probably have heard it by now, but go to that link and check out Hallow because there's so many amazing prayers ready to go. So if you're looking for where to start, how to start your prayer life, check it out because they're all pre-recorded. You just have to hit play and it walks you through how to encounter the Lord in prayer time. All right. Thank you again, Taylor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of To Grow Good. There are a number of ways you can support this mission. Follow us on Instagram at To Grow Good. Join the email list at togrowgood.com for free weekly devotions written by Catholic women, a monthly newsletter with the most impactful content along my journey home to the church, and a notification each time we upload a new episode. Share this episode with a friend, a family member, a loved one, or a coworker. Leave a written review on Apple Podcasts to help refer the show to others who might be seeking. And you can pray. Pray for this show to reach the souls that God wishes for it to reach. If you are praying for To Grow Good, please be sure to reach out and let me know at togrowgoodpodcast@gmail.com. Finally, you can help to cover the financial cost to create and produce this show. For as little as one iced latte a month, you could join our little community here at To Grow Good, the branches of the vine, in exchange for monthly bonus episodes, gifts from the To Grow Good shop, and more. You can learn more by visiting patreon.com/togrowgood. Thank you so much for being here, friend, and I will see you next time.